Every secret whispered into the digital void eventually creates a cyber echo that resonates through the halls of our future. We follow these signals to find the stories of survival and hope in a high-tech world. Subscribe now and listen to what the future is saying.
My son-in-law forged my signature on a power of attorney while I was recovering from knee surgery. He controlled my 3 restaurants for 11 days before he realized I'd already moved everything out of his reach. I came to America from Korea in 1981 with $340 in my pocket and a suitcase that smelled like my mother's kimchi. I was 24 years old. I spoke enough English to ask for directions and order coffee, and not much else. My first job was washing dishes at a Chinese restaurant in Koreatown, Los Angeles. The owner paid me in cash, $3.25 an hour, and let me sleep in the storage room for the first 3 months because I couldn't afford rent. I didn't complain. I was in America. Everything was possible. By 1987, I had saved enough to lease a 900-square-foot space on Vermont Avenue and open Han's Kitchen. Just me, a second-hand grill, and recipes my grandmother had given me before I left Seoul. The first month, I served 14 customers. I still remember every single one of them. By 1995, I had expanded to 3 locations. By 2010, Han's Kitchen was a recognized name across greater Los Angeles. 8 restaurants, 140 employees, and a catering operation that handled events for 2,000 people. Not bad for a man who used to sleep next to frozen dumplings. My daughter married my son-in-law in 2009. He was charming at the wedding, stood up straight, looked me in the eye, promised to take care of her. He worked in commercial real estate, wore good suits, and always seemed to be on the verge of a big deal that never quite materialized. I noticed early that he had expensive taste and a flexible relationship with financial reality. But my daughter loved him, and she was happy, so I kept my thoughts to myself. That's what fathers do. Over the years, my son-in-law started showing up at the restaurant offices more often, asking questions about revenue, studying our lease agreements, offering suggestions about branding and expansion that nobody asked for. I humored him. He was family, but I noticed things. The way his eyes moved when I mentioned our annual gross. The way he leaned forward when I talked about the property we owned outright on Wilshire. He wasn't interested in the food or the people or the 23 years of work that built the business. He was interested in the number at the bottom of the balance sheet. My daughter never saw it. Or maybe she did and chose not to look too hard. Either way, she started echoing his suggestions. Dad, maybe you should think about stepping back. Dad, running 8 restaurants at your age is a lot of stress. Dad, wouldn't it be nice to have someone handle the operational side so you could enjoy your retirement? I am 67 years old. I work out every morning. My doctor calls me a medical curiosity. The only thing I had retired from was tolerating nonsense, but I smiled and told them I was fine, because I wanted to see how far they would go. The answer, it turned out, was very far. October 3rd, a Monday. I was 3 weeks out from knee replacement surgery, staying at my daughter's house in Pasadena during recovery. My son-in-law had insisted I stay with them. So thoughtful, he'd said. Family should be together during these things. I had my own house 15 minutes away, fully accessible, with a home health aide I'd hired myself, but he was persistent and my daughter's eyes were pleading, so I agreed. I should have trusted my instincts. At 9:45 that Monday morning, I was in the guest bedroom doing my physical therapy exercises when I heard my son-in-law on the phone in his office down the hall. The door wasn't fully closed. I've never been the kind of man who eavesdrops, but something in his voice made me stop moving. He was speaking quietly, which was unusual for him. He was a loud man by nature. Everything's moving on schedule, he said. The PT is keeping him occupied. He won't notice until it's done. A pause. The signatures are clean. I had a notary we use for the real estate deals handle it. There's no way to trace it back. Another pause. Longer. Look, the power of attorney covers everything. Business decisions, financial accounts, property transfers, Once the restaurants are under my management, we restructure the LLCs, change the signatory requirements, and he can't do anything about it. He's 67 and just had surgery. Nobody's going to question a son-in-law helping manage an elderly man's business affairs. Elderly. He called me elderly. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to my son-in-law explain, in business-like detail, how he planned to take everything I had spent 36 years building. He wasn't frantic or guilty. He spoke the way he probably spoke to his real estate clients. Professionally, efficiently, like this, was just another transaction. The restaurants are worth about $14 million combined, he continued. The Wilshire property alone is 4.2. We list the business as a going concern, take acquisition offers, and walk away with enough to clear our debts and have $8 million left over. He'll get a care arrangement, some kind of assisted living, whatever keeps him comfortable. The business doesn't need to be his problem anymore. A care arrangement. Assisted living. He had already written the next chapter of my life without bothering to ask me if I wanted to be in it. I heard my daughter's voice then, faint and uncertain, asking something I couldn't fully make out. He's got early cognitive decline, my son-in-law said. The doctor visit last month, remember? He couldn't recall 2 of the words on that memory screening test. That's documented now. We have something to work with. That doctor visit was a routine physical. I'd been up since 4 a.m. the night before because of post-surgical discomfort, and I'd been distracted during the memory portion of the screening. My physician, Dr. Cho, had noted it as possible fatigue and told me to schedule a follow-up. There was nothing to work with. My son-in-law had taken a small, meaningless detail and sharpened it into a weapon. I didn't move for several minutes after the call ended. I sat with my hands folded in my lap and thought about my father, who had survived things that would have broken most people, and who used to say that the measure of a man isn't how he acts when things are easy. It's how steady he stays when things go wrong. I was steady. October 4th, 7:15 a.m. I called James Park from my bedroom with the door locked. James had been my business attorney for 19 years. We had gone to the same Korean Presbyterian church in the early 90s, back when both of us were younger and broker and full of plans. He was sharp, loyal, and he did not like to be surprised. He wasn't surprised this time. The moment I described what I'd heard, he was already typing. I know exactly what he did, James said. Power of attorney obtained by fraud. We need to file to revoke it immediately. But Han, here's the question. Do you want to fight him publicly? Or do you want to make sure this never happens again? Both, I said. James was quiet for a second. Then he laughed. Okay, then I need you to do something today, before you do anything else. I need you to call your bank and all 3 of your restaurant LLCs and flag any changes made in the last month. Don't reverse anything yet. Just document what he touched. What he touched turned out to be more than I expected. My son-in-law had used the fraudulent power of attorney to begin the process of consolidating management authority across all 8 restaurant LLCs into a single management company he had quietly incorporated 2 weeks earlier. He had also initiated a process with my primary bank to add himself as a co-signatory on 2 business accounts. He had contacted 2 of my restaurant managers directly, representing himself as my authorized representative, and begun asking questions about vendor contracts and lease renewal timelines. He had been busy. I called every manager that afternoon and told each of them the same thing. I am the only person authorized to make decisions about this business. If my son-in-law contacts you again in any professional capacity, you tell him to call my attorney. Then you call me immediately. All 8 of them called me back within 2 hours to tell me about prior conversations they'd already had with him. He had been laying groundwork for months. October 5th, 11:30 a.m. James filed the revocation of the fraudulent power of attorney with the Los Angeles County Courts and sent a certified letter to my son-in-law's home address. He also filed a formal complaint with the California State Bar because my son-in-law had used a notary associate from his real estate practice to authenticate the forged signature which implicated a licensed professional in the fraud. James also advised me to do something I had already been thinking about. I needed to restructure the business ownership in a way that made the kind of takeover my son-in-law had attempted legally impossible. This is where it gets interesting. Over the following 72 hours, working with James and my longtime accountant, Grace Lim, I executed a series of transfers I had technically been planning for years but never finalized. I established a family limited partnership for Han's Kitchen Group. I transferred 70% of the business assets into the partnership. I designated myself as the sole general partner, which meant I retained full operational and decision-making control. I placed the remaining 30% into an irrevocable trust for my 2 grandchildren, managed by James as trustee. My son-in-law's name appeared nowhere in any of these documents. Neither did my daughters. For now, that wasn't cruelty. It was protection. Anything she held was something he could reach. The Wilshire property, which he had mentioned specifically as the crown jewel to be liquidated, I transferred into a separate LLC with a single-member structure that required notarized, in-person authorization for any sale or encumbrance. Not a phone call. Not a DocuSign. Me, in person, in front of a notary, with photo ID and a witness. Let him try to forge that. By October 7th, James called me with news that settled something in my chest. The revocation has been processed, he said. The fraudulent power of attorney is void. The notary involved has been reported to the state licensing board. And Han, I received a call this morning from an attorney representing your son-in-law. What did they want? They want to discuss a resolution before this goes further. My son-in-law is claiming he acted on your behalf with good intentions and that there was a miscommunication about authorization. Miscommunication, I said. That's the word they used. I had Grace pull every bank access record from the past 6 weeks. My son-in-law had accessed account information 3 times using the fraudulent authorization, reviewed vendor payment histories for 5 restaurants, and had a preliminary conversation with a business broker about a potential sale of the restaurant group. That's not a miscommunication. That's a plan. James agreed. He told me to let him handle the attorney. October 9th was a Wednesday. I drove myself to the office of Han's Kitchen Group on Olympic Boulevard, the first time I'd driven since the surgery. My knee ached. I didn't care. I had a meeting with my 8 restaurant managers and I wasn't going to attend it by phone. They were all there when I arrived. Some had been with me for over a decade. Maria, who managed the Koreatown flagship, had started as a server in 2004 and worked her way up over 15 years. Danny, who ran the Beverly Hills location, had been with me since his 20s and now had 3 kids. They had built their lives around this business the same way I had. And my son-in-law had been circling them for months, pretending to speak for me. I told them everything. The forged document, the revocation, the restructuring. Maria was the first to speak. We knew something was off, she said. He kept asking about the lease terms. I told Danny after the second call. We just didn't know what to do. You did exactly right, I said. You kept working and you called me. We spent 2 hours going over the new ownership structure and what it meant for them. Nothing changed operationally. The restaurants still ran the same way. The only difference was that the path to ownership now ran directly through me, protected by documents that couldn't be altered by someone with a forged signature and a cooperative notary. At 4:30 p.m., my daughter called. Dad, I think we need to talk. Her voice was different. Not the practiced warmth she'd been using with me since the surgery. She sounded like herself. Like the girl who used to help me prep vegetables in the original Han's kitchen when she was 12, standing on a step stool to reach the counter. I know, I said. Come to the house tonight. Just you. She came at 7. We sat in the living room, not at the kitchen table, because the kitchen table was where we argued. The living room was where we talked. She told me she had known about his conversations with the business broker. She hadn't known about the forged power of attorney. And when I told her, she went pale in a way that I believed. I've known my daughter for 38 years. I know when she is lying and when she is genuinely afraid. She hadn't known he'd gone that far. But she had known he was planning something. She had let herself look away because they had real debt, real pressure, and because it was easier to frame it as helping Dad than to call it what it was. I didn't yell. I was done being angry by then. I just asked her one question. Do you understand now why I can't trust a plan that treats my life's work as your financial solution? She cried. She said yes. I told her that I loved her, that I would always love her, and that loving her did not require me to hand over everything I had built, so that her husband could liquidate it and move on to the next opportunity. She asked me what was going to happen. To the business, I said. It's protected. To the marriage, that's your decision, not mine. But I will tell you this, the man who forged my name doesn't get a second chance at my restaurants. October 14th, 9:00 a.m. I arrived at the Los Angeles County Courthouse with James. My son-in-law was already there with his attorney, a younger man who looked uncomfortable. James had filed for a civil fraud judgment and was seeking recovery of legal costs, business disruption damages, and a permanent injunction, preventing my son-in-law from acting in any professional capacity related to Han's Kitchen Group or any associated entity. My son-in-law's attorney opened with the miscommunication argument. There was a genuine belief that authorization existed, he said. My client was attempting to assist a family member recovering from surgery, and the lines of authority were not clearly established. Judge Carver, a woman in her mid-60s with the kind of patience that comes from hearing thousands of creative explanations for bad behavior, looked at the attorney over her glasses. She asked one question. Was the signature on the power of attorney document physically made by the petitioner? My son-in-law's attorney hesitated for exactly 1 second too long. James presented the handwriting analysis we had commissioned. The signature on the power of attorney did not match any of the 47 authenticated samples of my signature pulled from business documents spanning 3 decades. It was close, but not close enough. The forensic analyst testified for 12 minutes. My son-in-law fired his own attorney that afternoon, started over with someone new. It didn't matter. The fraud finding was entered into the record. James later told me that the state bar referral involving the notary had resulted in the notary voluntarily surrendering her commission 2 days before the hearing. She had provided a written statement confirming that my son-in-law had presented the document as pre-signed and that she had not witnessed the signing, which was a direct violation of notarial law. She cooperated fully once she understood the extent of what she'd been involved in. Outside the courthouse, a man about my son-in-law's age stopped me. He said he'd been following the case from the public filings, which are visible online. He said his own brother had done something similar to his mother the year before, and the family hadn't known how to fight back. I told him to call James. He gave me his card. He was a producer at a local news station. I called him back 3 days later. The segment aired on October 21st. 11 minutes on the evening news about elder financial fraud and the ways families can protect themselves before someone with fraudulent authorization gets close to the accounts. James spoke for 6 minutes. I spoke for 4. The reporter was fair and careful. My phone rang for 2 straight days after it aired. 3 attorneys contacted James about using our case structure, specifically the family limited partnership and the irrevocable trust arrangement, as a model for other business owners in similar situations. Grace Lim's accounting office received 9 calls from Korean American business owners asking about asset protection planning. James said it was the most productive week he'd had in years. My son-in-law's real estate firm, I learned from my daughter 2 weeks later, had terminated his employment. The reasons weren't made public, but the fraud judgment and the notary's statement had circulated through the legal community faster than any press release. He called me once, just once. It was late October, a Sunday evening. I was at the original Han's Kitchen on Vermont Avenue, sitting in the back booth where I'd eaten lunch almost every day for 36 years. The same booth where I'd signed my first lease expansion in 1991, where I'd told my daughter's mother that I thought we were finally going to be okay, where I'd come alone the morning after her funeral and sat with a cup of tea until the cooks arrived. He called while I was sitting there. I answered. He didn't apologize. Not really. He said he wanted me to understand his perspective, that things had gotten out of hand, that he had been under enormous financial pressure and had made decisions he wasn't proud of, that he hoped we could find a way to move forward as a family. I listened until he finished. Then I said, I don't hold grudges. That's not who I am. But there is no version of moving forward that involves you inside my business or near my assets. You used my name without my permission. You spoke to my employees as if you owned what I built. You told a notary that your father-in-law couldn't manage his own affairs, so she would authenticate a document she never watched him sign. You didn't make a mistake under pressure. You made a plan. He was quiet. I told him that the plan had failed, that the business was protected, that his name would never appear on a Hans Kitchen document, and that if he ever again attempted to represent himself as having any authority related to my affairs, the civil fraud judgment would be the least of his problems. Then I told him I hoped he found a better path. I meant it. But I wasn't waiting around to see. I hung up and finished my tea. My daughter filed for divorce in November. She moved back into the house she grew up in, the house I'd bought in 1994 when I finally believed the business was stable enough to justify it. Her room still had the same paint color she'd picked at 15. I don't think she even noticed. We had dinner together every Sunday. Slow dinners, the kind we hadn't had in years. She helped me in the kitchen the way she had as a child. We talked about her mother. We talked about what she wanted to do next. Professionally, now that the life she'd built around her marriage was being unwound. She was good at operations. She always had been. I told her that when she was ready, there was a place for her in the business, on her own terms, starting from the beginning and earning her way up the way everyone else did. She cried again. Good crying this time. On December 1st, I held the annual Hans Kitchen Group staff dinner. 212 people. All 8 locations. Every server and cook and manager and dishwasher gathered in the private event space we use for catering. We do it every year. This year I stood up and said something I had never said at one of these dinners before. I told them what had happened. Not all the legal details, just the truth. That someone had tried to take the business away from all of us. That the attempt had failed. That Hans Kitchen would still be here in another 36 years, run the same way it had always been run, by the same people who showed up every morning and gave a damn about the food and the customers and each other. Maria stood up first and started clapping. Then everybody stood. I'm not a man who cries easily. I've cried maybe 6 times as an adult. That night was one of them. I didn't let anyone see. I went into the walk-in refrigerator for 2 minutes and stood in the cold until my eyes were clear. Then I went back out and ate kalbi with my people. There's something I want to say to anyone watching this who has worked for decades to build something and is now watching family members treat it like an inheritance they're already owed. You are not obligated to hand over what you built to people who didn't build it with you. Love is not the same as surrender. Taking care of your family doesn't mean making yourself legally powerless. The moment someone starts using the language of concern, of help, of just trying to protect you, while quietly repositioning themselves between you and your life's work, that is not love. That is strategy. You are still in the game. Act like it. Document everything. Call your attorney before you think you need one. Build the walls before someone is already inside them. My father used to say that a man who plants a tree he will never sit under understands something most people don't. He understood that the work itself was the point, not the reward at the end. I planted a lot of trees. I sat under most of them. Nobody is taking the orchard. Hans Kitchen Group is still 8 restaurants. The Wilshire property is still in a single-member LLC that requires me in person to touch it. My grandchildren have a trust that will outlast all of us. My daughter comes to Sunday dinner. My knee is healed. The booth on Vermont Avenue is still my booth. I was there this morning. Coffee, not tea. The cook who's been with me for 22 years slid a bowl of doenjang jjigae across the counter without me asking. Same thing he's done every Tuesday for as long as either of us can remember. I ate it slowly. I looked at the framed photo on the wall. The one from 1987, opening day. Me in a white apron, standing in front of an empty restaurant that was about to serve its first 14 customers. I came here with $340 and I built this. Nobody gets to take that. Not legally. Not through fraud. Not through sympathy. Not through the slow, careful management of my image as a tired old man who needs protecting. I'm 67. I show up every day, and I'm just getting started.